Welcome to Lecture 27 of BIB201 Bible Doctrines 1. Today's lecture will be the final lecture for the semester, and we will finish the doctrine of anthropology. So let's get started. Continuing where we left off underneath the result of Adam's sin, not only was there a change in man's nature after he sinned, there was also a change in man's nurture. Number one, the first thing we find out is that they were expelled from the garden. They went from having a perfect place to live to being kicked out of that area and a curse placed upon them and the land. Which leads to number two. The woman was cursed. She received three primary cursings because of mankind's sin. Letter A, she would receive multiplied pain in childbearing. Now, it's notable here to remember, it's not that she would receive pain in childbearing. Multiplied pain was the curse. So most likely, Eve, if she would have had a child before the fall, would have had some pain associated with the childbirth, but now it's going to be much worse. Then letter B, she would also receive multiplied conception. This basically just means that it would be much easier for a lady to get pregnant than it would have been before the fall. And then letter C, she would now be under Adam's headship. That was actually a product of the fall. Before the fall, this means that they were both co-equal in headship. Well, now she is cursed to be underneath Adam's headship. And then number three, the man was cursed. Now, admittedly, I would say that his curse was not as bad as the woman's, but he received two primary cursings in this. The first was that he would have to work in order to eat. Now, work was not a curse, but the amount of work he would have to do now in order to feed himself and his family was multiplied. So that leads us to believe when they were living in the garden, everything grew perfectly, everything grew very easily. There was not much he had to do in order to maintain it. And then letter B, he would also have to curse or work a cursed ground. This shows us that now that sin has been entered into the world, he went from a perfect garden without any thorns, without any thistles, without any weeds, to a land that has thorns, thistles, weeds that would not produce fruit as easily as it was before. So now that we've discussed what is man, the image of God, the result of Adam's sin, let's look at the transmission of sin. All major conservative groups say that we are responsible for Adam's sin. However, Pelagius and Arminius did not exactly hold this view. They are now known as modernists. We're going to address the orthodox view concerning the transmission of sin, which leads us to the question, why are we responsible for Adam's sin? Well, we have to start, number one, by looking at something called immediate imputation. Now, imputation means to add to. Amputate means to take away. Concerning the immediate imputation, there are two primary views concerning how Adam's sin was immediately imputed to us. The first is called the seminal headship theory. And the seminal headship theory states that since the whole human race descended from Adam, then in a real sense, you and I are in Adam. We are one with Adam. Therefore, what he did, you and I did. This would most likely line up with that doctrine called traducianism, that we get our souls from our parents. And the seminal headship theory was made most popular by a man named Augustine, or commonly called Augustine. Then number two, the other view is known as the federal headship theory. And there's two things to note about this. The federal headship theory most properly agrees with Reformed theology's covenant of works. And then letter B, the federal headship theory teaches that Adam faced God's test as the representative of all mankind. Now, representation here is the main thought with the federal headship theory, but Many object to this because it makes God unfair in his choice of representative without mankind's consent. And obviously, as it says here in point A, this would be that view of the Reformed theology or covenant theology or Calvinism. So now that we've talked about immediate imputation, letter B, mediate imputation. Immediate imputation means that we were responsible for Adam's sin immediately when he sinned. Mediate imputation is that we are responsible for our own personal sins. Why is that? Well, number one, all are born with a sinful nature. Because you and I share Adam's nature, you and I also share Adam's sin. The following three things I'm going to give you are known as the three imputations, and these are extremely important. The first imputation is that Adam's sin was imputed to us. Adam's sin was added to us, and we did not have a choice because we are descendants of him. Then letter B, our sin was imputed to Christ. And Christ did this voluntarily. He willingly took upon our sin to die for it so you and I could be saved, and so you and I could have letter C, his righteousness imputed to us. Just like Christ's imputation of the sin onto him was voluntary, his righteousness being given to us is voluntary on our salvation. Based on this, number two, we can be condemned for two specific things. Letter A, we can be condemned for Adam's sin. Since we are born with that sinful nature and we share in the sin of Adam in the garden, you and I can be condemned because of his sin. But not just because of Adam's sin. Letter B, we can be condemned because of our own sinful acts. And lastly, Roman numeral 5, what about infants? When we are talking about the sin being imputed to individuals and what we are condemned for, it inevitably brings up the question, what about babies? What happens to them if they die and have not expressed faith in Christ? Well, there are three primary views concerning the attitude concerning infants. Now, this will be a discussion I will get into in much greater detail in Doctrines 2, but here in Doctrines 1, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a teaser to get you ready for next semester. The first view is that Methodists believe that all infants are innocent, therefore saved. One of the biggest problems with this is that if all infants are innocent and therefore saved, then at some point they have to be unsaved in order for them to get saved again. So that is a little bit problematic. Then letter B, Roman Catholicism advocates that only children who are baptized are saved. And there are some other groups as well that believe this, not just Roman Catholics, but they are the predominant group that does teach this. And then thirdly and lastly, Baptists and Presbyterians insist that all children who die in infancy are safe. Now, the key word here to note is that they do not say they are saved. They say they are safe. And we will get into a much greater discussion on why that is taught next semester. And since we've come to the end of these notes, that means test number 6 will be coming up very soon. Test number 6 will cover the section from angels on page 46, all the way through we just finished discussing the attitudes concerning infants on page 54 in your student notebook. Well, that brings us to the end of not only this lecture, but all the lectures for BIB201 Bible Doctrines 1. I hope you enjoyed them. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm always here for you.